Like many people, I've always been fascinated with Dr. Seuss, and so the idea of this movie, which is extremely Seussian and also deals with music, was quite attractive to me. The thing that most attracted me to the film was the vision of Dr. Seuss and the way that the music is performed. Friedrich Hollander was an extraordinary German composer, born in 1898, died in 1976. And he came from this German school of composition, and he was writing in Berlin in cabarets in the 20s at the same time that Kurt Weill was working. And so his music is very influenced by that period. He came to the United States in 1933, and he started writing for movies. He was Marlene Dietrich's accompanist and main composer through her years at Paramount. And so he wrote with a Hollywood style, yet the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T is in some ways a throwback to Hollander's earlier compositional style. It has, for me, a very Germanic feel at times. It has a vaudeville feel, and it also has its Hollywood influences, but it's one of the most schizophrenic scores of any film score I've ever known. I think the score is fascinating. I think that Hollander and Seuss's score is uneven, but at its best, it's unbeatable. Particularly with the Dungeon Schlimm-Schlamm, that is a piece of music that is quite fascinating. It's beautiful. It has the most gorgeous romantic theme towards the end of the sequence, and the way that Hollander put it together is wonderful. At one point, I obtained the complete score of the Dungeon Schlimm-Schlamm, and I tried to convince my friend Michael Tilson Thomas, who's a very distinguished conductor, to play it. And I described it to him, and he said, well, it sounds very interesting. I'd like to see the score. So I showed him the score, and he started looking at it. And he looked at it, and then he looked up at me as if I had gone completely around the bend, like, are you kidding?
Come on and dress me, dress me, dress me in my finest array, 'cause just in case you haven't heard, today's Do-me-do day. Dress me in my silver garters, dress me in my diamond studs, 'cause I'm going do-me-doing in my do-me-do.
I think that my favorite moment in the film is the dressing song, because the dressing song itself is one of my favorite pieces of music. It's typical Dr. Seuss lyrics, and Hans Conried's performance in the film overall, I think, is supreme. I think he is the standout in the movie, and his performance of the dressing song is absolutely wonderful, and the way that the thing is staged. It's sheer vaudeville, and the way that the thing keeps changing keys, and you keep seeing all these odd things happening with the way that they're dressing him is certainly one of my favorite sequences. The dressing song is extremely difficult to perform, and if you listen very carefully, you will hear how Hans Conried's soundtrack is intercut. There are changes in the quality of his voice from phrase to phrase because they had to piece together his performance bit by bit. And there were actually several different assemblies of his performance, and there is an unused version of the dressing song in which he performs it with a much more hysterical sort of demeanor. But it's very evident, especially with the remastering of the soundtrack, that it is put together section by section.
I want my organdy snood, and in addition to that, I want my chiffon Mother Hubbard lined with Hudson Bay rat.
It is very difficult to properly set to music the lyrics of Dr. Seuss. The reason being that they are at times nonsensical, at times written for children, at times the references are for adults. They're sort of odd in that they go all over the place, but that of course is his intention. He coins new phrases, creates new words, and creates new imagery lyrically, and of course we know visually. He had an overall picture for this film. Musically, Hollander had to try and capture all those different elements that were in the Seuss lyrics. He had to create a whimsical sound. I would bet anything that the lyrics came first. I don't think for a minute that the dressing song was written music first. I don't think it's possible that it could have been. But the phrases, the words that Seuss comes up with, like in Get Together Weather, where they're talking about schlooping and schlurping and schlipping and schlopping and all that stuff.
What fabulous weather for loping and leaping.
What fabulous weather for bipping and beeping.
For snipping and snupping and snooping and sneeping.
What fabulous weather, oy vey, what a day.
It's very hard to set something musically to match that, because you have to be able to hear what the words are, and yet they have to be in a natural context. Very hard to do, and Hollander is one of the few people who I think could have done it as well as anybody. Hollander's compositional style changes from song to song in the film. In the dressing song, it is vaudeville. It is clearly bum ba da ba dum ba ba dum bum. The way he wrote the vamp and the way he wrote the phrases and the way he wrote them as run-on, he clearly wanted that to be, I'd say, American vaudeville of the 1920s. When he wrote the Dungeon song, that has a Kurt Weill feeling to it, with the sort of dissonant chords that he has underneath the elevator operating first floor dungeon.
Assorted simple tortures.
That is Germanic Kurt Weill cabaret style. But the lyrics are making fun of the department stores of the time, where the elevator operator would say, third floor, ladies' lingerie, second floor, notions, that kind of thing. So it is a takeoff on that. And so Hollander made it very ponderous to invoke the fear of what the characters were feeling, and went back to his Germanic cabaret roots. In the case of Dream Stuff, it's just a sweet ballad that was supposed to evoke the feeling of drifting away to another place.
Dream stuff, funny thing about this dream stuff. First it's there, then nowhere.
A song like Dream Stuff, I think lyrically is not Dr. Seuss's greatest lyric, because it's a little bit forced or maudlin in what it tries to say. But the beauty of what Dr. Seuss wrote is that he created these new words and catchphrases, and unless they were set to music properly, they would not come off right.
Into bright blue day. Feel it, seal it, don't let anybody steal it.
Most of the songs are rather traditional in form, except for the ballet sequences, the butterfly ballet. The Schlim Schlam dungeon sequence is one that is very unusual musically and is schizophrenic in that it goes from one style to another. And that is quite unique. I don't know what I can compare it to, except to say that it is at times very Gershwin-esque in the main theme. The thing that surprised me about Hollander's music is that it has a very bluesy quality to it, and a very jazzy quality that I didn't really know was inherent in his music from that era. Morris Stoloff was the stalwart musical director of Columbia Pictures. He was there for many years, which means that he got along with Harry Cohn, which is no small feat. But he was a genius at what he did. He was nominated, along with Hollander, for an Academy Award. And Stoloff's job was to oversee the complete musical production of the film. There were many other people who worked on it, most notably a fantastic musician named Paul Mertz, who was an extraordinary pianist, and under a pseudonym wrote a very famous popular song called I'm Glad There Is You. But Stoloff assembled a team of the greatest musicians in Hollywood that he could get. He borrowed musicians from other studios, and he was able to create the overall sound of the picture. It's an essential thing for a musical director to make sure that there is a unity in a project, especially like a musical film such as Dr. T, and there are very few films that were like Dr. T. He had a number of very difficult jobs, because he had to make sure that the songs not only fit properly in the context of the film, but then he had to make the decisions about how they were going to orchestrate them, how they were going to get in and out of the songs musically, how the scoring was going to lead in and out. They had to pre-record the ballet sequences so they could work on them choreographically, and then they had to choose the instrument the instrumentation in a way that it would fit the odd instruments that the guys were holding. And Stolov had to oversee all of that, and it was very, very difficult, meticulous work. It took thousands of hours to put that together, and that's why they were nominated for an Oscar, because that film was a particularly fiendish challenge, musically speaking. One of the reasons that Dr. T has a cult following is because it reflects the unique vision of Dr. Seuss, of Hollander, of Stanley Kramer. They created a film that is unlike any other film, and even though it is flawed, it is not what it could have been, it still retains so much originality and imagination that it affects people of all different types, of all different generations. Certainly people talk about the psychedelic influence, and sure, I know that many people probably were on different sorts of trips when they viewed the movie. But you don't need to go on a trip to see that film, because the film takes you on a trip. And one of the things that I love doing is hearing all the little bits and pieces of the songs that were cut out of the film. It's a movie that is a big what could have been kind of thing, but it still will remain in its own way a classic, because it was a singular vision that went in a direction that nobody has ever gone since.